Welcome to Talk Ottumwa, a production of Greater Ottumwa Partners in Progress. On this podcast, we'll talk about the local businesses in Ottumwa to give you the backstory to their success. We'll also talk about the economic initiatives that are driving the progress of the community. And we'll talk about the issues that the community faces and much more. So stick around and let's talk Ottumwa. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Talk Ottumwa. Well, today, I brought the heat with me. I did not bring the heat outside, unfortunately, because it's still a little bit bitter cold, but I did bring the proverbial heat with me, and I have the Chief of Police, Chad Farrington, with me. Welcome, Chad.
Hey, appreciate it, Mark. Good to be here.
Yeah, so, when people think about economic development and business engagement, which is really what the topic of this podcast is, they don't really associate the police department with that. But I would counter the argument with that the police department is really one of the most integral parts of economic development and business engagement, because when people look to come to the city to live, they look to come to the city to do business, start a business. They want to make sure that they have a safe community to be in, which is where you come in. So I'm really happy to have you here finally. It's taken us a little while to get you here, but I'm glad to have you. So let's, for the people who don't know about you, Chief, let's hear a little bit about yourself.
Well, sure. A little bit of a background. I was not one of those kids growing up that thought I was going to be a police officer. I kind of fell into it, and I stayed right here. Went to Indian Hills, Buena Vista, got my 4-year degree in criminal justice, political science. At that time, I had an individual that I was very good friends with that was on here at the Ottumwa Police Department, and I chose to come here in 1998 and have stayed in the community ever since. I've been a patrol officer, a sergeant. I've worn a lot of hats as an instructor and different job duties. And then prior to becoming the chief of police, I was the lieutenant of the patrol division.
So what is it that you like the most about being on a police department?
Even with some of the political views or lenses over the last 5 years or so, that's kind of put a spotlight on law enforcement, it's still a very honorable profession. You're not, I guess as a chief, I'm a little bit more behind a desk than some days I would like to, but you're not behind a desk. You're out and about in the community, trying to make a real difference, in your community, in individuals' lives. It's number one, it's not all about arresting people and taking people to jail. There's a lot more community engagement, problem solving that you get to do as a police officer, and those are some of the things I really enjoy.
Speaking of the political thing here, and I know we're probably already getting off on a little bit of a tangent, and I know that there are a lot of good things that have come over the past few years, but there's also been a lot of challenges that have come to the police department as a result of some of this political windage that's come along. How have you seen some of the good things and the bad things from that?
Just some of the bad things, again, it's that broad stroke of a paintbrush, right, where unfortunately, there are some officers that have been involved in incidents over the last numerous years, and even beyond that weren't right. They weren't doing the job right for whatever reason, and you get painted in that broad stroke because you wear a uniform and a badge. But outside of that, positive here in Ottumwa, the community was extremely supportive and continues to be very supportive of the police department, and that really makes our job so much easier when we know we have support in the community, and we're not being pigeonholed quite as much as a more on a national scale, if you will.
Okay. So speaking of your staff, I've had the privilege over the last few years of developing relationships with a lot of your officers, and I think they're all very fine people. Do you mind talking just a little bit about your staffing that you have at the PD right now?
You bet. I've got a great staff. And in fact, as of today, after this podcast, I will be swearing in my newest officer, and
Awesome.
That puts us to a full boat, which is 40 sworn police officers. We haven't been there for quite a while. Recruitment has been again, going back to that kind of political lens and stuff. I think recruitment's been very difficult, not just for Ottumwa PD, but law enforcement in general across the state. But I've got a great staff. I'm super happy we're going to finally get to a full police department here just later this morning when I swear them in.
Perfect. Now, how's that 40 officers, how's that divided up between your day shift and your night shift?
You bet. So the department's actually broken up into 3 divisions. You have a patrol division, which is generally your officers that are out and about in the marked units in the full uniform. We have a services division. That's going to be some of your more ancillary services, your school resource officers, the community service officer, the part-time parking enforcement, and then our DARE evidence officer. Outside of that, you have the investigations division. So that is going to be comprised of general crime investigators. We have 3 currently in those positions. And then that also includes the Southeast Iowa Interagency Drug Task Force. So there's a working sergeant and a working officer on that task force, and then other members from other agencies make up that group. So during the day, you also have administrative staff, such as myself, command staff that are there. So you're going to have more officers and personnel in and out of the building during the day than the overnights.
Okay. Let's talk about those SROs for a second. That's probably the most visible officers that you have, especially to the children in the community. And clearly, they're doing a really important job. They're keeping the schools safe. Can you talk about that relationship that you have with the school district and how those officers play into the bigger picture?
You bet. Before we had SROs, it could be very difficult for those officers when there's not a lot of interaction between them and the children that at that particular building that they're serving. So, the Ottumwa Community School District Superintendent Mike McGrory has been great to work with. He's been very supportive of the school resource officer program. They actually supplement our budget and pay for a portion of those officers' salaries, which allows us to have those staff members there. The ability for those school resource officers to interact with the kids, and if I had a dollar bill for every time I heard a parent say, I come walking into a store and they lean down and say, "Hey, you better behave, or that guy over there's gonna take you away." It is funny, but at the same time, it's like, kind of what are we teaching our kids?
You're not instilling
early
the
on?
best image of the police officers in there.
There's this little bit of a fear factor that gets taught to our kids. And I'm not saying those parents meant anything by that. It's just sometimes, our words have power beyond what we know, so to speak, in those situations. But having that positive interaction where it's not just about, hey, I have something critical going on, or I've called the police there, I'm stressed out, something very bad's happened, or there's, some type of emergency. Having that just down-to-earth, one-on-one interaction is a very positive thing.
Okay. Well, speaking of your other divisions, you talked about your investigative division and everything. What are some of the initiatives that the police department has going on right now?
Well, we actually, just in April of 2023, so here coming up, we'll mark the first year of it, but we brought back the K-9 program for the patrol division.
How's that been working out for you?
It's been great. Just in the amount of time that we've had those animals in service, just them alone, over a pound of methamphetamine's been taken off the streets.
That's great.
They've assisted with search and rescue operations, which really was a large component of why I wanted to bring that program back. Outside of the, drug detection and being proactive with that, it's the search and rescue component. Over the within the recent last few years, we've had some unfortunate situations where, we've had some elderly in the community that had walked out and into the environment, and due to those elements and conditions, they end up passing away because we were unable to locate them. And I do believe that, possibly had we had that tool during those incidents, maybe we could have located those individuals and saved lives. So
this is probably going to be where the conversation gets a little bit sensitive. And everybody in the community always has their own opinions, and the city of Ottumwa is no different than any other community across the nation. But from a police perspective, what is it that you are seeing in the community that maybe we as a community could work on, or some of the problems that we're having?
Obviously, it's no secret. Here in Ottumwa, we do have a methamphetamine problem. It's still the drug of choice in our community. It's a difficult problem. When you think of it in terms of the war on drugs, you could say it's the longest lasting, most prolific and expensive war we've ever had in our country. It's been ongoing for decades and decades, and will continue into decades because, unfortunately, if there's a demand, there's going to be somebody's going to develop that supply. We've had very good support in the community when it comes to our community members getting hold of the police department when they see something, say something, and I want to make sure that relationship kind of continues.
Sure.
There are eyes and ears. We can't have a police officer, so to speak, on every street corner. It's not about being a snitch or a narc or anything like that. It's getting services there to maybe an individual. If you're seeing something that's out of place or wrong, it may not even be something of a criminal nature. It may just be a situation where we can provide other services to whatever that situation is occurring.
Right, because I did a police ride along not too long ago with one of your officers, and we came up to an area with a couple of individuals that I don't think that there was any necessarily a problem going on, but there was clearly a mental health crisis that was starting to happen. So that intervention was nice, and that was a neighbor that had called and said, "Hey, there might be a problem over here." So to your point, I think that there are other things other than the crimes that are happening that the police can intervene on.
And you're absolutely right. Bringing up that mental health situation, that is a very predominant issue that we deal with in law enforcement. And back to your question about another initiative we started here about a little over 3 years ago, as we partnered with Southern Iowa Mental Health, and we actually have a mental health professional that actually works a 40-hour work week schedule. They're supplanted at the police department. They actually respond to those calls for service with a police officer, and it allows us to engage with that individual in a mental health crisis in the moment, but then having those services, those avenues for assistance even after the fact, by having that mental health professional with us, it's been a great program.
And I would assume that you have seen the evidence of the good work that person's been doing, and there's probably been a little bit of jail diversion as a result.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, once you get through that initial mental health crisis that person's going through, that's where that services, she can go back, make contact with that individual even after the fact. Are you eating? Are you getting water? You taking your meds? You making your appointments? And get them in contact with mental health professionals to try to assist them with that issue that's going on.
Yeah, because I know, from my prior life working in a nonprofit, and mental health was one of the things that we worked with. A lot of the people that are in those leading up to and in the mental health crisis, part of the problem is they just don't know that there is assistance available for them. So having that person at your level to be able to make that interdiction and come in and say, hey, I'll help you with those resources, that's probably something that is very helpful to those folks.
You bet. I would agree 100%.
Okay. So, talking about the mental health problem, talking about the drug problem, and with the drug problem, usually there are other associated crimes that are going to affect the community, be that property crimes or personal crimes. Obviously, that stuff is going to show up on the state and national crime rates for the city. And one of the things that we've seen on social media, and I personally consider them spam stories. They talk about the most violent cities in the state of Iowa, or the most dangerous cities, I think is what it's actually titled. And Ottumwa always shows up on the top of that list. And having my former life as a city council person, I guess I've had a little bit of inside knowledge of how Ottumwa reports information versus how other cities in the state of Iowa report information. But people tend not to believe me because I'm not the man in uniform. So I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about what that crime rate really means for the city of Ottumwa versus the state?
You bet. And you hit the nail on the head. When we report our criminal statistics to National Crime Information Center and the UCR, the Uniform Crime Reporting that we do to the FBI, every department could be reporting those numbers in a different way. And then, as well as I do with statistics, they can be manipulated to give you a result that you may prefer versus what is a true factual thing. And Ottumwa, we report the crime exactly how we're supposed to report the crime. But sometimes when you hear those stories out there about those statistics, kind of like you said, is this crimes against property being considered, this is what quote unquote is dangerous, or is this just specifically and narrowly looking at crimes against a person or individual, such as your sexual assaults, your robberies, homicide, murder, different things like that. So I always tend, when I look and I hear those stories, because obviously I hear them too, I wonder exactly where are they getting those statistics from, and how exactly are those being viewed?
Yeah, it's always interesting to me. You read stuff online, and somehow there seems to be a disconnect from what you're seeing online to the sense of safety you actually have in the community, because I don't know too many people who actually fear to walk down any of the streets in Ottumwa after dark, which to me is the true gauge of how safe should I feel in a community, because there are several neighborhoods in Des Moines that I would not walk down during the daytime, let alone nighttime. I've made that mistake and done it before in Des Moines. So, I see that, and then I translate that down to Ottumwa, and I feel like there's a disconnect, because we don't have that fear in Ottumwa like we would in other cities across the state of Iowa, or even in the Midwest region.
I would agree with that, absolutely.
It would be interesting if you had more people talking about, I do feel the sense of safety here. And I guess a luxury of the city of Ottumwa that you don't have someplace like in Des Moines is, if you do have to call 911, the police are going to be there pretty dang quick.
You bet. And the other thing with the stats is, every single year, in fact, for 2023, I'm getting ready to put that out now. We do an annual report. All of our statistics are right there. You're going to see how many of those particular crimes were reported to the police department throughout the year. And like you said, being able to gauge it for yourself versus what somebody who is just out there writing a story about, just looking at numbers, I think is important.
And circling back to the beginning of this conversation, and I have said this on virtually every podcast that I have done, so if anybody's listening and is shocked by this, I would suggest they listen to the other 30 episodes that I've done or so. I think in some cases, a community can be its own worst enemy. And when we're looking at economic development, retail attraction, new business attraction, people perpetually sharing stories that they probably know aren't accurate. The people from the outside can see that. And, by all means, if something's true and verifiable, I don't see a problem with sharing that. But stuff that you question whether it's actually true or not, you're really opening up a can of worms that hurts the community by doing that. And this is one of those cases because what you're seeing online isn't the true experience of the normal person in Ottumwa has. And people from the outside are looking at that when they're Googling Ottumwa, Iowa.
That's right. And back to that, words are power. I mean, if you live in Ottumwa and you leave the community to go on vacation or something like that, or travel to another part of the state, and you basically make comments like, oh, well, I live in Ottumwa and it's a bleep hole or something like that. There's power with that. There's association with that, and having that mindset, and it just creates an atmosphere where we're not going to have any positive change.
It goes back to, we have a billboard here in town that says "Love where you live." We've got to learn to do that as a community.
I agree.
Another sensitive subject to talk about for just a second, and then again, this goes back to the social media thing, talking about the release of people who have been arrested, and what seems to be a revolving circle of people getting out into the streets after they've committed crimes. And I know that there's always, for this particular subject, it's a little bit sensitive because it's not just the police's version of what's going on. It's the police, it's the county attorney, it's the judicial system. So I guess you're the person in front of me, so I'll ask, can you give me a little bit of insight into that particular subject?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, the police's mission, if you will, we're to go into a chaotic, critical situation. We're to develop facts to articulate probable cause that a crime has occurred, and then arrest said person. Obviously, develop the case, search for evidence that corroborates that. Then your prosecuting attorney is responsible for proving beyond a reasonable doubt that person committed that crime. So, I'm not saying it's necessarily right. Obviously, I'm a little biased as a police officer, but we're kind of that forward face. We're the initial contact when somebody has something traumatic or critical happen to them in their lives. So when something fails, obviously we're usually the ones that end up getting the blame for it. We missed something, or we didn't do something right, or however that is. But beyond that, it's up to the judicial system to decide ultimately whether it's judge or jury that person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and then up to the judge what kind of sentencing is going to come from that. So yes, it gets very frustrating as a police officer when you spend hours and hours, and at certain times, and depending on the case, maybe days, creating a work product of paperwork and gathering evidence and interviews and testimony from depositions to testifying at court to have somebody get a sentence of maybe 25 years, and 4 years later we see them back in the community. Mm-hmm. So it can be very frustrating.
Yeah, and I'll share another personal story from ride-alongs. And this really is kind of that middle area between the law enforcement and the court system. People getting arrested and then going and doing a little bit more of a ride along, and then passing by the police station and they're already bonded out, which is, and I understand, that's a judicial system, that's the way it works. But, as a citizen, it is a little frustrating to see things like that. And I know that's beyond the scope of the police department, but it's just another one of those things that, the police did their job, and then it kind of got turned over to the judicial system, and then things just kind of didn't go right from there.
You bet. And I know that there's obviously people in the public that even get frustrated with us with the police department when it comes to, well, there's an old adage, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So
Right.
outside of those facts to corroborate what somebody is saying, there are times when you may know that somebody committed crime, but you don't have enough to charge that individual.
Right.
So,
Well, and that's the constitutional privilege that Americans have.
Absolutely.
You have the right to have proof against you. So, speaking of public perception of certain things, let's talk about the stance that the police department has of being almost a paramilitary unit, and some of the equipment that you have, because that has actually come up in not too recent or not too distant past. You guys have some big equipment, and I don't know what it's called, a personnel vehicle or whatever that's called. You mind talking about that for just a second?
you bet. And we can jump all the way, start out with the kind of the low-hanging fruit there of the vests that they see a lot of the officers wearing on the street. When I started in 1998, pretty much the only option for a patrol officer was a concealed vest that was worn underneath the uniform. Over the years, due to whether it be critical incidents that have occurred, we learn as a profession, just like everybody else does in the world, of maybe we need to change this, start looking at it this way differently, develop different type of equipment to better assist us. And a lot of my officers today are wearing that outer vest, and there's a few reasons behind that. Some of the big ones are, if you've never worn a concealed body armor underneath a dark navy blue uniform in Iowa in the middle of August, you really don't know what I'm talking about. But the heat and perspiration that you get wearing that vest in that heat is at times horrific. Having this outer carrier, it is extremely easy to get on and off. To cool off when you're come back to the PD, do paperwork. It also allows all the gear that historically was worn on the heavy duty belt around the hips to get it up onto the upper body and the upper thorax. Okay. So it actually, we've seen results when we're looking at this that it actually diminishes injuries, whether it be to the hips, things like that, lower back. When you look at disability of officers or injuries that occur to officers, those are okay. A big reason why we do that. Then lastly, in the event an officer does take fire and that vest defeats that round or not, the outer vest carrier to remove that, to get to those wounds, to assist that officer is much, much faster than having to open up the shirt, get it off of their body. Because there's even dangers outside of, even if that vest stops the bullet, there's still a lot of kinetic energy that's going internally into the body. So you need to rapidly get to those wounds and treat them. Now, on the other hand, another paramilitary type equipment that I obviously recently people saw and were commenting about involves an MRAP, which is a armored personnel carrier. It's a unit, again, kind of like our K9. It's not all about just tactical situations like high risk search warrants, arrest warrants, hostage situations. We also grabbed onto this as a search and rescue type vehicle. This vehicle would aid us in a lot of ways that it's going to get into areas, in particular floodwaters, that we learned from some of the flooding we've had over the last decade or so, that our SUVs are not going to be able to handle. On the tactical mission, some of the things that people talked about on Facebook within the last few months, that is a vehicle that it doesn't go out on every mission. When we are getting intel and developing a plan for a search warrant, we look at what the facts are or what we know of those individuals, everything from criminal history to what they're maybe posting or saying in the community, or even what kind of photographs we're seeing that they're involved with. When we have individuals that have that recidivism, repeat offenders, they've got some violent offenses in their criminal histories. There may be showing pictures of them with assault rifles or automatic weapons and different things like that. Those are some of the facts that we look at. One, to whether or not we're even going to use the emergency response team to do said search warrant, but two, whether or not we're going to bring out that armored personnel carrier. It is actually in the Wapello County Sheriff's Office actually controls that unit. They're the ones that put in for it and procured it. But we have two Wapello County deputies that are actually part of the Ottumwa Police Department emergency response team.
Okay.
So that's how that piece of equipment came to be utilized by OPD.
Well, we've talked about some sensitive stuff. Let's talk about something that's not so sensitive. One of the things that the Ottumwa Police Department does, and you might have to fill us in on when it started, but I think I've been through it myself. I think it's wonderful. It's the Citizens Police Academy, and I would encourage everybody in the community to go through that program. It's extremely eye-opening. Would you mind talking about that for just a second?
You bet. It's a lot of fun. We just well, I shouldn't say we just. We're getting ready to graduate our 11th annual Citizens Police Academy class. That'll be this coming up Monday. So it's a 8-week program. It's usually starts in February and runs through April 1st. The reason why it runs through April 1st is there's a city holiday, President's Day, that's involved in there. And we don't.
I thought there was going to be an April Fool's joke.
Right?
In there
Yeah.
somewhere.
No April Fool's joke, but we don't do it on that city holiday. And then we pick it up for that first Monday in April. So it allows the community to come in. They get a see the entire facet from our budget and equipment all the way to our emergency response team. It covers all the divisions, all the functions that we do as a police department. We'll do case studies with investigation on an actual homicide case that was worked here locally in the by the Ottumwa Police Department.
Which, it's interesting.
Yeah. That's one of the comments we get back on the critiques is that's one of the nights that people really like the most. You get to schedule a ride along with an officer. We also have a range day where it's usually when it warms up, obviously, in the summer, where we have those participants. They can come out to our firearms range. They can see what those weapons are. They can actually shoot them if they choose to. So it's a really good time, and we get a lot of positive feedback about the program. So I'm very happy that we can continue to provide that to the community. South Ottumwa Savings Bank is our sponsor for that. Also, Rosamond's Incorporated co-sponsor along with South Ottumwa Savings Bank.
Now, if someone is interested in that, where can they find information out about it? Where can they sign up?
So usually in December, so coming up here December of 2024, we'll start putting applications out on Facebook, the police department Facebook page, the City of Ottumwa's webpage under the police department, or you can actually come down to the Ottumwa Police Department and pick up one of those applications.
Are there requirements?
No, the only requirement is, we do a basic in-house criminal history. Obviously, if somebody has multiple, felony convictions or different things like that, they would not be allowed to attend the program. But other than that,
you let me in, so you'll let pretty much anybody
well,
in.
absolutely. But other than that, no. It's just come with a good attitude, and we welcome anybody who wants to come in. It's each Monday. I'm sorry, I should have stated that for the 8 weeks. It's every Monday night. It starts at 6 p.m. We provide you with supper, and it usually ends about 9 o'clock each night. So,
again, I think it's tremendous asset that you're providing to the community, and I would encourage anybody who's listening, if you haven't signed up for the program, I'd very much encourage you to do so, because number one, you get to develop a rapport with some of the officers that are presenting, which is great. You get to learn about what goes into policing in the community, which is great, and you get to learn a little bit about the community, quite honestly, which I think is invaluable. So that being said, kind of wrapping up the Citizens Police Academy, is there anything that the community can do to help the police department?
Kind of what I talked about earlier, just, be that good partner. We are members of the community too. None of my officers believe they're above any other citizen. We're here to do a job. Just because we, wear a badge and a uniform, we put our pants on, so to speak, just like everybody else. So be that good partner. If something's going on in your neighborhood or at work, something's going on where you believe you need police assistance, give us a call, because, your police force is only going to be as good as the community it serves. And we want to be that good partner and that good resource for our citizens.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you feel like we should cover?
Yeah, we kind of covered a lot, didn't we?
We did.
In a short amount of time. Not that I can think about, but if you want to have me back to talk about a particular topic, just let me know.
Perfect. Well, Chief Farrington, thank you for coming in today. I hope everybody gets a lot out of this conversation, and I'm sure that your phone line is open in case anybody has any follow-up questions for you.
You bet. Sounds good. Thanks, Mark.
Well, thank you again, Chief Farrington, and everybody. Hope you enjoyed the program, and we'll see you on the next episode of Talk Ottumwa. Greater Ottumwa Partners in Progress would like to thank the following Signature Circle investors who help us deliver on our mission to advance the prosperity of the Ottumwa region: Cargill Incorporated, Seafirst Credit Union, Elliott Oil Company, John Deere, McCune and Reed Insurance, Ottumwa Regional Health Center, the Ottumwa Legacy Foundation, South Ottumwa Savings Bank, City of Ottumwa, and the Wapello County Board of Supervisors. Please visit www.gopip.org to keep up on community events, podcasts, and everything Ottumwa.